Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the Chief Operating Officer for TreasuryJobs.com. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our webinar, Effective Cash Flow Forecasting, Myths, Realities, and Why It Matters. I'd like to thank our webinar sponsor, Centage, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps make this webinar possible. Cloud computing and big data finally make cash flow forecasting easy, right? Not by a long shot. It still remains a process filled with inefficiency, mystery, and information that can lead to less than optimal working capital allocation in addition to other suboptimal strategic decision making. Before I delve into the content today, I'm going to offer a few quick words about TreasuryJobs.com, cover a few housekeeping items, and then review our learning objectives for the webinar, as they represent the components of our value proposition to sharing your valuable time with us today. Relative to TreasuryJobs.com, big news. We recently launched Treasury Careers. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. At TreasuryJobs.com, we still post Treasury Jobs opportunities, and we still have TreasuryJobs.com, which will only focus on Treasury job opportunities. We also have Treasury certification resources, complimentary webinars like this one today, a myriad of Treasury best practices, and stay tuned for even more. Yes, believe it or not, a new Treasury certification. We are in the business of disrupting the market in terms of the services and resources offered to Treasury professionals. A few housekeeping items for the webinar today. The slides are already available in the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll be sending you links to the presentation and the webinar recording over the next 24 hours. For those of you interested in CTP credit, you need to answer all polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. Several of you indicated your interest in CTP credits on the way into the webinar. However, if you did not do that, please send me an email to Ernie@TreasuryJobs.com and I will get those CPE certificates out to you. We'd like to hear from you today, so please ask your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to your questions at the Q&A session, which will be at the tail end of the webinar. If I don't get to your question, fear not, I will reach out to you after the webinar is over. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Okay, what are our learning objectives today? Why are we here? I want you to be able to separate cash flow forecasting myths from reality and define what a successful cash flow forecast looks like at your company. That's a point I want to make up front. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly how to deliver the greatest cash flow forecast for your company because that is going to change based on your company's characteristics, your industries, your cash flows, your risk tolerance. What I am going to do is offer you some baseline best practices and some valuable insights into how to connect with the right people to help you engage in that process, in that project, and also the resources that you need, again, and ask the right questions. I'd like you to be able to understand how effective cash flow forecasting drives improved decision making across the enterprise and impacts the bottom line, and how to be able to quantify the impact. I'd like you to be able to devise a strategy to address specific areas of your cash flow forecasting process to improve the quality of the short-term and long-term cash flow forecast at your company. And finally, I'd like you to be able to identify specific opportunities to improve the alignment of people, process, and technology in your cash flow forecasting process. So again, these are the tenets of my value proposition to you in spending your time with me today. We will revisit these at the tail of the webinar. Please stay on for the post-webinar survey. If I haven't accomplished these objectives, I want you to let me know. The only way we get better is with your feedback. Okay, how are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, first, we're going to go over some common cash flow forecasting myths and why they're not really true in today's world. We'll dive deep into how to define your cash flow forecasting process, how to identify your cash flow forecasting resource needs, how to identify and mitigate inherent barriers to your cash flow forecasting success, talk about how to align people, process, and technology in the realm of cash flow forecasting, and of course, we'll wrap things up with some final thoughts and some resources. Again, I like to talk about resources as well. I'm not going to give you everything that you need today, but I'm going to point you to some resources that are going to help you on your journey to the best cash flow forecasting process at your company. A few other learning objectives that I didn't touch on earlier. They are probably most important to me, and this is why I consider myself a unique webinar speaker. I want you to think. I want you to think about your cash flow forecasting processes, the people involved, how you can do things better. I want you to smile. Believe it or not, this can be fun even though it's a webinar. And finally, and most importantly, I want you to take an action as a result of the webinar. If you haven't taken an action after the webinar, I have failed in my mission today. So I want you to reach out to me with a LinkedIn connection, talk to your folks, talk to your colleagues, take someone out to lunch who was involved in that cash flow forecasting process. Next time you're at a conference, just go up to someone you're talking to about something else, bring up cash flow forecasting. So I want you to take an action. That is the whole purpose of our time here today. So the reason I'm going over why cash flow forecasting matters is oftentimes to improve your cash flow forecasting value, you're going to have to get an investment in terms of people or funds in order to upgrade your technology. So we need to be able to make that business case. Two sets of people in our constituency here, folks. One is maybe the CFO has to improve the investment, but also all those that are involved in the cash flow forecasting process that you are going to impact as you make changes to the process and technology involved. So we need to be able to make that business case and build consensus to execute those initiatives that are going to maximize the value of our cash flow forecasting efforts. So why does it matter? It impacts our borrowing and investing decisions. It's always important, but if you are a net borrower, it's even more important because misses in cash flow forecasts can cause you to borrow money when you don't need to. My experience as a Treasury practitioner in this realm, we had a lot of FX exposures. And so we had a plant that was in another country, in Mexico. The contract was supposed to be negotiated in US dollars. So I was all ready with my US dollars to make a payment. Well, I get a harried phone call from the guy that says, well, we needed to pay 30% of the contract today, or construction is going to get put back a month, and I need like $1 million in pesos or $5 million. I'm like, wait a minute, pesos? So the fact that wasn't in the cash forecast, I wasn't in the loop, it caused me to go out and scramble around and buy pesos at a very bad rate that wasn't favorable to our company. So the cash flow forecasting matters. Investment decisions as well, especially as we're finally starting to see a little bit more yield in terms of those short-term investments. So in terms of optimizing the cash deployment, if you have misses in your cash flow forecast, it can impact your debt covenants and your compliance risk. So you need to know, okay, what are the impacts of certain actions that we're going to take? Maybe we're going to make an acquisition, invest in something. So is that going to cause me to trip my debt covenants? One of the worst things you can do as Treasury is trip your debt covenants, and that can cause a lot of problems. One of which is that it can really impact your relationship with your borrowers. Your loan can become due, so it can cause you all types of problems. As I mentioned before, it just impacts working capital efficiency. So what we're starting to see now, which is great to see in the arena of Treasury, there is a focus on the entire cash conversion cycle. So probably up until about 3 or 4 years ago, I was seeing more of a focus on accounts receivable. How do we get paid? There really wasn't enough focus on the accounts payable side. But now that we're seeing these AP automation solutions, there's much more focus on that side of the game, and also supplier relationship management, so that cash deployment and velocity has to be optimal. So we need to be able to forecast those cash flows as accurately as possible in order to maximize the value of the cash flow, where it's going and why it's going there. And then it helps that part of our process should be to increase visibility in the sources and uses of cash and the associated cost of benefits. What that does is that allows us to improve working capital efficiency. So one of the side benefits, I would say, of improving your cash flow forecasting is going to be the homework that you need to do in terms of understanding the sources and uses of cash, and that will let you know the blind spots that you might have in terms of visibility, in terms of where's money going, why is it going there, how is money coming in, is it getting in as quickly as possible, are we having issues in cash applications? So all these things will kind of rear their head. And so as you look at that business case for cash flow forecasting, maybe you get to invest in a TMS system, and it's not only cash flow forecasting, hey, accounts payable, accounts receivable, all these Treasury success metrics, boom, that business case is so much easier. And then good cash flow forecasting impacts financial agility and operational agility. In today's world, we need to be able to react almost in real time, changing business conditions, geopolitical events, currency markets, things going on. So there's a lot more I'd say there's a lot more sources of uncertainty, and some of the things we're not going to be able to predict, but we need to be able to react to them. We need to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they come our way. And the other thing is, especially if you're at a public company, there's an increased investor focus on cash balances and cash deployment efficiency. So you need to have that visibility. You need to be able to report on the cash flows and the efficiency of the cash flows. And those are questions that you're going to be asked from your board, and you also might get the opportunity to go in front of your board. I know it's kind of scary, but it's also a tremendous opportunity. So if you really have your pulse on the button in terms of that cash deployment efficiency, it's going to really increase your strategic profile within your company. So I love this slide. So I talked a lot about the cash conversion cycle. So this is why it matters. So again, I like this cycle. Okay, we order the products, receive products, inputs, process invoices, pay for products, sell finished goods, receive cash. As I mentioned before, especially when I was in Treasury, more so early in my career, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we only focused on the receive cash, sell finished goods. Credit came up through Treasury. We talked to the credit manager. He was in the loop, talked to him every day. AP was over in accounting. We weren't as concerned with the efficiency of the accounts payable process, how payments were being made, what types of supplier relationships did we have, and how the accounts payable process was actually impacting those supplier relationships. So again, this is why the cash flow forecasting matters so much. It helps us really optimize this cash conversion cycle. And again, this conversion cycle needs our attention. This should not be managed in silos, and the ability to effectively forecast cash at points in the cycle and the cash flows. It's what's going to be able to allow us to optimize that deployment of cash. So let's get into some cash forecasting myths. These were myths that came my way, and I honestly had these myths when I started in Treasury many moons ago. The benchmark of cash forecasting success or cash flow forecasting success is how close you get to 100% accuracy. So a lot of us, when we come out of school, we have our MBA, we got a master's degree in economics. We think we're going to go in there, run this super regression analysis, get that R squared at 100%. Well, that's not reality, folks. A couple points to make. First of all, there are inherent barriers in how close you get to 100% accuracy. In most cases, it's not even possible. And what you need to do is you need to look at the cost and benefits to that given level of accuracy. So the way I like to keep it simple is, what level of accuracy do I need to impact my decisions? So if 80% is good enough to optimize the relevant decisions, I don't need to try and go 90% or higher unless there's benefits of that to the company. So what is that cost benefit analysis? So if you're not improving decision making, then I would say I'm going to have a hard time justifying that investment in that cash forecasting, how I'll term accuracy. So accuracy is about impacting decisions, and that technology, we need to be able to understand the variances in that cash forecast from the actuals. Another myth, the more data the better in terms of cash forecasting success. I've heard this term, and it almost makes me gag, big data. I'm tired of the term big data. Okay, there might be more data out there. So what? What's the quality of the data? What good is it doing for us? A lot of times I see people trying to forecast cash. They're just dumping a bunch of variables in there, especially if they're trying to do a regression analysis. So you want to focus on those 3 to 5, maybe more terms that really impact your dependent variable in that forecast. So maybe it's accounts receivable balance, whatever that might be, end of day cash. You need to look at those variables, 3 to 5 variables. So it's not necessarily the case, the more data, the better. You need to look and really focus on the quality of the data, the timeliness of the data, who is the data steward, right, for that data in the cash forecasting process. You need to own that and have visibility into that. Another myth, which I suffered from as well, I'll give you another story there. The more complicated the statistical method used, the better the cash forecast. So learned this one the hard way. Went into my job, a manufacturer of submersible motors, so they were trying to get my help in indirectly cash forecasting. So we were looking at the submersible motor forecast. So my colleague up in finance and in product marketing, they've been working together. So they had this moving average model with a seasonal adjustment, and so so they were pretty good, and they were like 80%. So I'm like, oh, give me the data. I'm going to run a regression analysis. So I sit there for about 3 days and kind of bang my head on the wall, and I didn't even get close to that. So it wasn't that my statistical regression analysis, my Monte Carlo, was the right statistical method, and we'll talk about how to get at the right method, statistical, non-statistical. It's more about the data the data you have, the data you need, and the variables, the movements of the variables which are impacting your cash forecasting. So you don't need to drive a Porsche if you need a Pinto or a Yugo. I'm dating myself there. So maybe a Focus. So again, don't try and get too complicated. A lot of times keeping it simple is much more valuable. And then finally, the last myth that we have is technology is magic and is a key to an effective forecast. Technology is a driver of forecasting best practices, but it needs to be aligned with people and process. So I'll probably say this too much today. It's about people, process, and technology. So when you're having problems putting things in perspective, your project's not working right, I'm not getting people on board, just take a step back and think, what is it that we need to do in terms of people, process, and technology? So I love this diagram. It's really a good overview. So let me take another step back here for a moment. So there's probably 3 categories of you on the webinar today. Some of you are probably a little newer to Treasury, newer to cash forecasting. Some of you are kind of in the middle, so you've been trying it a couple years. You might not have ownership for it, and so you're just trying to see what others are doing. And some of you are cash forecasting experts, and you've forgotten more than I'll ever know. So I'm going to try and really drive this content so it's valuable to all of you. So those of you who are in the expert category, it's still very, very valuable to go back and take a look at your processes, your people, all the cash flows. Believe me, I've done this before. Even as a seasoned Treasury professional, I've gone back and take a look. So if nothing else, it gives you a fresh look and helps you, motivates you to that continuous improvement culture that we all want. So this is courtesy of my friend Tim Hessler. Look at the date on this, 2009. You know why I still have it? Because I love it. I've never seen anything better. And believe me, I've seen probably hundreds of cash forecasting presentations in my Treasury career and when I worked at AFP. So I love this. Here's the steps. I'm sorry I'm going to read off a slide, but I love the slide. Step 1, define your business objectives. What are your requirements? Clearly establish the goals of the cash forecast. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So what are the business objectives? Why are we doing it, right? Short-term forecasts. Are we looking at investing borrowing decisions? Are we looking at an acquisition strategy? Are we looking at capital structure optimization? Those are 3 very distinct things, and those can absolutely require a different process and a different statistical method. Requirements, what are the goals? What techniques do we want to consider? Analysis, what are the current business factors and forecasting drivers? What is it that's driving the accuracy of our forecast? Let's look at terms of the things we have direct control over, things we kind of have control over, things we have no control over. And then we need to separate those out and understand those drivers of that variance between our predicted and our actuals. And those things we can't control over, that sets the upper bound of our forecasting accuracy. And then the design, determine the level of detail, right? Can line items be in forecast? So I talked about this data. So we'll talk about in a little bit top-down, bottom-down approaches. So you don't want to get yourself too twisted up in putting 60 or 70 variables into a forecast if they're not really impacting the accuracy of the forecast. It might be data that you have, and it might be nice to have, but nice to have is different than need to have. And then implementation. So as we're looking to undergo some sort of improvement project, what kind of support do we need? Outlining plans. How do we get accountabilities and critical milestones? And then on the backside, measurement. So iterations for constant improvement. So we need to define that project ROI, and not just when the project is implemented, on an ongoing basis. So what is that value? We'll talk about this in a little bit too. What is that actual value? So a lot of times I listen to cash forecasting presentations. I hear, you want to do this, you want to do this, but no one ever says, okay, how do I measure the accuracy? How do I put a number on there? And that all gets to how do I make the business case for that investment in improving our cash forecasting or cash forecast accuracy. So how do we set the stage here? So after we set the stage here, I'm going to have our first polling question, so you can all try and understand how I can talk so quickly. So how do you set the stage? So these are the baselines. Like I said, no matter what size company you are or industry, these are things that you need to have as the basis in terms of cash forecasting best practices. You need to understand the type of forecast that you need. Is it an operational forecast? How far out is it going? 1 to 30 days? Is it a short-term forecast? People normally think of that as maybe a rolling 13-week forecast. Is it a medium term? Maybe that's a 12-month rolling forecast. What is the long-term strategic forecast? Along with the type, is the goal of the forecast? Is it to manage short-term borrowings? Is it to tie to balance sheet forecasting? Are we doing pro forma income statements? Are we managing working capital? And then what is the desired level of accuracy that we need in terms of each type of forecast? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and launch our first polling question, and I'm trying to get a sense for you in terms of the visibility of the cash balances and movements at your company. So as I mentioned before, it all starts with visibility. So that's going to really define some of the inherent barriers that you might have in terms of your cash flow forecasting accuracy. So a few reminders here. Those of you who might be interested in CTP credits, I'm going to need you to answer all the polling questions. And then, of course, I would love your questions. I'm seeing a few questions. That's awesome. So let's have as many questions as possible. I'd like to get to a lot of questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Again, if I don't get to your question, I'll reach out to you via email, but also happy to have a conversation with you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so. Then we're going to go ahead and take a look at those results real quick. And so what I'm seeing is really, what I was hoping is that there's kind of a broad spectrum of us out there in terms of those three categories I mentioned. So let's go ahead and take a look at these really quick. So there are 18% of you are kind of in that category, in that you're kind of just getting started a little bit. You're trying to figure out, okay, it's going to be probably a bigger project to get you to where you want to be. 36% of you, blonde spots. Yeah, we all have blonde spots. So that's funny. Thank you. So the spell check didn't catch that one. I'm blonde, so I guess I have a few blonde spots. I'm really impressed that 46% of you are almost on the right side of the curve. So hopefully I'm going to offer you some value here today. But however, good across the board, but not optimal. So again, you have to look at what is optimal. Some folks, you might actually be optimal. The way you need to look at optimal is, if I increase my accuracy, is that going to impact my decisions? And then if it impacts my decisions, what is the value that's going to give us in terms of those better decision making? So let's go ahead and get back to our presentation here and see if I can navigate my webinar control panel, since I've only done 400 webinars. All right, so what else do we need in terms of cash forecasting, setting the stage? Here you go. Those of you who have never been in the weeds, the biggest project that ever impacted my career the most in Treasury was I was tasked with having a project where I had to map out every single movement of cash in our company with all people, processes, and systems. We were in, I don't know, 10 or more countries, 80-something bank accounts. How many systems? I really had no idea. How many signatories? How many different areas? But they still use what I had done all those years ago. However, it's gotten much more complicated, but it really opens your eyes into the opportunities that you have, not only in terms of cash flow forecasting, but about working capital optimization. So if you're looking at this might be a heavy lift, look at having this be part of an overall Treasury project. What are we going to do with our Treasury project? We're going to look at AP, AR, and cash flow forecasting accuracy all in one. So get your folks involved here. So how do you understand your inflows and outflows? Again, people, you got to get in the weeds. I'm a Treasury geek. I love being in the weeds. You have to map your cash flows in detail. You got to identify your inflow sources, outflow sources, who within your company drives these cash flows, all systems used to move and record your fund movements. Does this seem like common sense? I hope so. That's why I'm good at what I do. I keep it simple. And the more you can keep it simple, the better you are going to be in terms of optimizing the value from your cash forecasting efforts. So let's go ahead and take a quick, I'm going to have to go in the back to the future time machine here. Woo, when I was a Treasury professional back in Bluffton, Indiana. So I just want to show you, this is really high level, but this is kind of what it looked like, the detail. So back in the day, I had this master account in Little Bluffton, Indiana. Actually, it was in North Carolina. So we had lock boxes. So we had 3 lock boxes in Chicago. You, some of you are probably cringing, but that was due to acquisitions. And then we also had a Canadian lockbox. We had a dual currency lockbox. So those were sources of funds. Those were all in dollars. We had accounts receivable, electronic funds receipts. We had ACHs, wire payments. We had intercompany electric funds receipts. We always got those in terms of US dollars. And then we had miscellaneous checks and electronic receipts. So this is kind of the high level, right? So let me understand where this money is coming from. I might need to forecast what are my receipts in the Chicago Harris lockbox. What are my receipts from AR electronic funds? How do I work with credit? Here's one that I had direct control over, intercompany electronic funds receipts, so I could actually control when that money was coming back. That was huge to us in terms of optimizing our purchases and sale of foreign currency. So kind of what you need to do is you need to understand what's moving these cash flows. Do I have control? How do I get control? And then how does improving that level of control improve your cash flow forecasting accuracy? A lot of times it really tightens that up when you have as much control as possible. For example, when I could control intercompany funds receipts, if there was something, maybe 20% that we wouldn't have the money we needed in, I knew I could pull in those funds and make sure that we had the cash available and we didn't need to borrow money. Huge benefit to the company. Okay, our outflows, again, I'm dating myself a little bit. We had an AP account. We had 2 AP accounts. We had a different account for payroll. We had a TPA medical bank account because we were self-funded. We had a dividend bank account. We had our electronic payments. We said ACH. We had wires. We had to fund our purchase cards. And on CFOs out there, you are definitely cringing because I had a petty cash account. This was a pet peeve of my CFO. And then we had to fund short-term investments. So again, high level, Treasury 101. Guess what? Treasury 101 is what makes you an outstanding Treasury professional. Don't forget the blocking and tackling. So remember these. Here's where we get down to the weeds. So back in the day when we had Sarbanes-Oxley, we had to all put these together. So what this does, it's from knowledgeleader.com, and got the link there for you. And so what it is, it's an outgoing wire transfer. So what needs to happen, right? What employees are involved? What systems are involved? It also gives us the ability to look at our risk management points. So if we're trying to forecast the amount coming in or going out from outgoing wire transfers, this will help us understand, okay, who is going to impact that number? I need that number. Who's going to be able to tell me what that number is? Where is the information coming from in that system? How do I get that system into my system that's coming in and out? I apologize if my audio quality is poor. I am definitely working on it. So one of the things I will do is if the webinar recording is not crisp, when I get that, I am going to go ahead and re-record that webinar for you, and I will post it so that the sound quality is absolutely crystal clear, and I will get that back out to you. So if there's something that I'm saying and you can't hear it, just go ahead and type in that question for me, and I will reach out to you as well. So again, apologize that. Technology, right? You can't control it all. Okay, so cash forecasting. How do you get the right method and the right workflow? You need to clearly understand the current and intended purposes of your cash flow forecast. Those can be short-term and those can be long-term. Again, you can have different forecasting methods. You can use one method for your weekly forecast, one method to calculate your balance sheet out 6 months, your cash flow statement. So you need to understand your data, its sources, and its relative accuracy. What are the things that we need? We need to identify the sources of variance within your current forecast and focus on those that you can control. So, and then in selecting a forecast, you want to make sure you don't force a method or procedure you don't want to force that statistical procedure. Your data and your objectives need to drive that. So again, let your objectives and your data process, not technology or statistical method of forecasting. And you want to identify professional colleagues who face your same challenges and engage them to identify best practices for your company. So if I always say these are slides that you want to print out. So this is the first slide I'm going to tell you to print out. So this is a slide I want. So I appreciate all these messages about the audio quality, but I'll take care of that afterwards. So focus on the slides. Focus on what you can hear. If you can't hear, send me a question. So again, it's a webinar. Things happen. All right. Cash flow forecasting methods. These are the methods that are currently they're common. Usually what we'll see is a hybrid. So you can have a top-down forecast, a macro view. You look at aggregate numbers and then transpose them down to business units. It's more suited for a medium or long-term forecast, and it often starts with an aggregate sales number. You can have a bottom-up, and this is where I have my most experience. I was mostly focused on that daily forecast, the weekly forecast, and we're really getting in the weeds here, looking at segments between business units, product lines, and I say there it's kind of like limbo. So it's almost like how low can you go, right? So that requires detailed projection of receipts and disbursements, and then implementation requires time and resources, people, data, and systems. And hybrid is a combination of the top-down and bottom-up methods. So again, usually for your company, you're going to have a combination of the types of forecasts that you'll need. And usually when you look at things in aggregate, it's going to be a combination, a hybrid of a top-down and a bottom-up method as well. So what are some specific techniques? Again, I'm not going to go into an hour-long discussion on statistical methods. What I am going to point out to you is on the slides in the next couple sections, you're going to see hyperlinks down in the right-hand corner. So the next few slides are ideas and concepts that I've garnered from one of my colleagues who has a great course, an on-demand course called Forecasting and Treasury. That is going to be in the other resources section. So if you want a deeper dive into these areas, I encourage you to go ahead and check out that webinar as well. So we have non-statistical methods. Again, sometimes these might seem simple to some of you, and some of you that are using some statistical methods, you might want to take a step back and try a non-statistical methods and see. It might actually be the case that that type of model is going to give you better results than your statistical model. So maybe you've gotten too complicated. Maybe you've gotten, technology, you're in love with your technology, you're in love with your big data, you need to take a step back. So non-statistical receipts and disbursements model, this is what I've used, accrual backout model, pro forma cash flow model, again, if you're looking at acquisition, scenario analysis, statistical methods, some of the simpler ones, moving average, exponential smoothing, those things work well in Excel. And so, and then we have regression analysis and Monte Carlo simulation. So those are your more complicated. Excel does pretty well at regression analysis now, but if you need something that complicated, you're going to have to upgrade in terms of technology. So real quick, we're going to run through a few cash forecasting techniques. Again, I'm not going to dig too deep here. If you really need that comprehensive look into exactly how there are actually seminars out there. So there are actually seminars out there where you spend a whole day, a whole week. You can actually bring in your data. So one of the resources I have, there is a course offered by the AFP. I actually helped recruit the instructor, so I know it's a really good course. So if that's what you're after, I think that's a good resource for you. So cash flow pro forma model, it's used for strategic planning, scenarios, what if, sensitivity analysis. We're looking at the structures that we have. We're looking at acquisitions. We're looking at potential changes in market conditions. A lot of times you start with the balance sheet and P&L, and then you say, okay, now we're going to roll forward. So what happens to my forecast with new conditions and assumptions? So based on the past, how are we going to impact on the future? So with the help of your pro forma balance sheet, and you estimate cash flows. You start with your P&L, you add in your changes in receivables, and you can get your cost of goods sold. And then you look at cost of goods sold, days payable and inventory, that can give you your cash margin. Cash margin, you look at SG&A, S&A expenses, wages, and then you get net cash flow for operations. So that lets us look at that. We're taking a look at that cash flow statement. So we're looking at what are we doing for operations, what are we doing for finance. So regression analysis, another cash forecasting technique. You're looking to establish a relationship between variables to be predicted and known values. So there are many types of regression analysis: linear regression, nonlinear regression, etc. The most common use is a simple linear regression, so I'm going to give you a quick review on your MBA course right now. So the most common is a simple regression analysis. Y is what you want, a dependent variable, C is our constant, B is the coefficient, and X is the independent variable. So for certain things you want to calculate, there might only be one independent variable, but really what that X is really most often a matrix. And what you're doing Y is you're really estimating the mean value. So it really makes a difference on the distribution of that forecasted dependent variable. So again, there's going to be variance there, and we're going to have to look at both sides of that variance, whether it's positive or negative. So the terms of forecasting accuracy, what you need to do is you need to be able to measure that. So a couple ways that we look at: you have mean absolute deviation, MAD for short. Some of you are mad because you can't hear me very well. So the mean absolute deviation is a measure of the absolute forecast error over the period of time being measured. So you're looking at the summation of the absolute value, your actuals versus your forecasted values over a number of periods, and then your mean absolute percentage. You convert that to percentage terms. Again, I have got another reference here, calculating financial forecast accuracy, which is another great resource that you can have yourself look at when you have more time. You can look at cumulative forecast error, summation of the actuals minus the forecasted values, and then your absolute forecast error. Your absolute forecast error is your sum of your it's difference of your actuals and forecasted values and the number of periods there. So in terms of forecasting accuracy, what we're going to do is very important. Financial forecasting is more about variance management than accuracy percentage. So again, how does the forecast impact the quality of your decisions? So let's go back. Audio is going in and out, and I am on a very expensive headset with a very good connection. So again, my apologies. I will re-record the whole webinar and send it out to you, and my sincerest apologies. So financial forecasting is more about variance management than the accuracy of the percentage. How do forecasts impact a quality of decisions? If you know that every March your forecast has a possibility to produce a large variance either way due to seasonal events, then plan for it. You should never stop trying improving your model. Financial forecast improvement is about measuring both accuracy and volatility, and then continuously working to improve your understanding of the key resources and causes of the volatility. You need to take action. Once you understand how and why it fluctuates, make changes. If you're not impacting decisions, there is no value. So, and then finally, your forecasting accuracy improves your business agility. So here is another slide that I would suggest that you print out. So forecasting accuracy. So what is the value? What does it mean? What is driving that forecasting accuracy? And what is the value that we have? So here's that forecasting accuracy ROI. Econ 101, love econ, utility, change in X, change in Y. For every 1% change in the forecast, what would have been the change in the profitability? That helps you put the ROI on there. And then you want to make sure you measure both positive and negative impacts on an ongoing basis. So if something goes in your favor, that's okay, but you want to understand that. So for example, when I was helping manage FX risk, my CFO told me if you have a positive impact on the income statement, I'm still going to be mad. So probably the biggest chewing out I got was when there was a big movement in the FX gain loss, and it was in our favor. But my CFO was like, "That's not what we want. We need to mitigate that variance. So we need to understand why that happened and make sure it didn't happen again." So he told me, "We are not in the business of making money on FX traders. We are not in the FX business." So in terms of cash forecasting assessment, so you have to, so how do you, once you determine where you need to be, you understand, okay, why am I using my forecast? What's the level of accuracy that I need? Okay, how am I going to figure out what I need to get me to the level of accuracy that I need? So you need to document the resources you have currently to develop and delivering and executing a sustainable cash flow forecasting process. So how are we going to do that? We want to do that in terms of people. Which colleagues contribute to or affect cash flow forecasting and its accuracy? Do they care? If they don't care, how is it that we are going to be able to hold them accountable? Technology, which systems do you use to provide input and output related to cash flow forecasting? Processes, what ancillary processes and policies are going to be involved in defining the cash flow forecasting process? So you need to understand what it is that you have at your disposal in terms of people, process, and technology. How do I optimize what I already have? That's the first step. How do I remove the inherent barriers? And then once we remove the inherent barriers and optimize what we have, then we need to look at, okay, what are those gaps? How do we get from A to B? And then what is the value in increasing that accuracy percentage? So let's take a look at those cash forecasting inherent barriers. So if you're looking at this forecast, or if you're looking at where you're at right now, some inherent barriers that you have that you could possibly remove, they're people, individuals who affect forecasting accuracy. They don't understand, they don't care. Sometimes these things are taken care of by having incentives put into people's compensation. Sometimes they just don't understand the value of that forecast, how it's impacting the company profitability. There can be a lack of internal support as the importance of contributing to forecasting accuracy. So we can go to the CFO and bring in tissues and cry, John doesn't care. And the CFO's like, well, I don't care either. Well, you show the CFO, you know, John gave me that cash forecast that cost us $100,000. I guarantee he's gonna care. And then, of course, we have drama, people that don't play nicely with each other, interdepartmental, intradepartmental. So we need to learn how to play Dr. Phil. So you got to find out the reasons people don't play nicely with each other. Oftentimes, these folks just don't understand the consequences of not playing well with each other. So we can take these people out to lunch. That's a whole nother webinar. Happy to have that conversation offline. Some inherent barriers in terms of processes, sometimes by their very design, facilitate reporting and recording untimely, inaccurate information. So if you're getting information overseas, balances, movements that are 5 days late, 10 days late, well, that's going to have an inherent barrier to your cash flow forecasting success. Sometimes processes compete against each other. And then again, I say it again, people need to who impact that value, they need to understand that. Technology, what are the inherent barriers there? Systems don't communicate effectively with each other or facilitate communications among relevant parties. A lot of the cloud-based applications, especially on the CRM side, they give us visibility into that sales pipeline. There's chat features. The AP systems have this as well. So that can be a real barrier to that value in that cash forecasting effort. Systems offer more than one version of the truth. What is that? We all know that's Excel. Again, collaboration. You have to have collaboration between parties, looking at things in real time, trying to do things that have that audit trail. So, and again, current data technology doesn't meet the needs in terms of timeliness and accuracy. All these things are inherent barriers to success. Sometimes you can remove these barriers with little to no cost of your company, and now we're probably part of the way there. So when we started, it might look like Mount Everest, but now it's like, okay, that's an incline that I can handle. So now we're going to go ahead and launch our second polling question. So I'm just trying to get a level set before we start talking about technology, what the main system is that you use in terms of leveraging, the technology you leverage in terms of your cash forecasting efforts. So again, those of you who are interested in CTP credits, I'll need you to go ahead and answer all the polling questions. And of course, I'd still like to take your questions in the questions box of your GoToWebinar control panel. Anything that's not related to audio quality would be cool. Yeah, so I'm aware that the audio quality is bad, and I feel you. I feel your pain here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so we can be mindful of our time. Then we're going to go ahead and take a look at these results, which are actually almost shocking to me, given the earlier polling question in terms of what folks were telling me they had in terms of the visibility, and those things. So let's go ahead and close that and take a quick look. So now we have 75% of you use Excel. So there must be something else going on for you to have that great visibility into your cash balances. So maybe you have a TMS into Excel. So I need to look at that question. But again, Excel, there's no reason that Excel isn't inherently evil. We hear about Excel all the time. But if you need any type of sophistication, you're in multiple countries, your business is moving, you're using macros, you might want to look at some TMS system or other application to use in addition to Excel. Now, if you're using a moving average and you're using an Excel add-on that allows you to put data, you pump data in from your ERP, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But to me, it looks like for those of you on the call, I think technology is one place where you might want to look at. There might be some opportunity to unlock some of that strategic value in terms of cash forecasting. So let's go ahead and get back to our presentation content. So let's take a look at that resource gap analysis. So again, we get that. So how do we do that now? It's people, process, and technology. So people, who do you need to get on board? Who do you need to redeploy or engage? Can you train people up? Do you need external people? So how do we do that? Processes, what existing processes do we need to revise? Do you need new ones with the adoption of new technology? In terms of technology, systems, do you need to communicate better? Do you need access to new software? Upgrades, we need a TMS. So again, look at that resource gap analysis. Let's keep it simple, people, right? That's what really moves the needle. People, process, technology. Where am I at? How do I remove inherent barriers? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? And what's the cost benefit analysis? So, learning objectives revisited. So I promised you that we would take a look back at our learning objectives and make sure that we were touching on all that we promised you at the start of the webinar. So we wanted to allow you to separate cash flow forecasting myths from reality. So I think we've done that. So again, a few of those are the goal should be 100% accuracy. No, we talked at that at length. So we need to define that upper bound. It might be that we only need 80% accuracy. It might be we only need 60% accuracy. So that's not the case. The more data, the better. Not necessarily. We talked about that. What's the quality of data? Is that data impacting the value of our forecast? If not, the data is not useful to us. We need to be the data steward. We need to go on that data diet. A more sophisticated statistical method is going to be better for you. That's not necessarily the case. Again, your data and your data and your industry and your cash flows need to determine need to help you determine what the right method is for your company. Another myth, which I really didn't cover, is that some people are under the opinion that someone's going to be able to tell you, they're going to be able to tell you on a webinar exactly this is the best way to cash flow forecast. This is the best way to forecast cash. It's not true. It depends on your company. There are specific variables to your company, your movements, your industry, your systems, your inherent barriers. So you want to make sure that you're digging into the right areas there. And so technology is definitely not magic either. So you need to look at how technology and statistical methods align with people and process. So I think we helped you define what a successful cash flow forecast looks like at your company. You need to understand what your duration is, and then why you're doing the forecast. What is the goal of your forecast? How is it impacting the decisions at your company? What is that cash flow forecast being used? What is that specific cash forecast being used for? What is it being used? Why is it being used? What impacts are being? What is it? What decisions are being impacted? Tie those things back. We're using this to set our investment balance. Okay, how is that? You know, we increase that accuracy by 1, 2, 5, 10%. What's the value? You need to be able to put numbers here. I want you to, so we promised you discover how cash flow forecasting drives improve across the enterprise and impacts the bottom line. I think the biggest point here is that visibility is really the key to improving the decision making across the enterprise. We want to make data-driven decisions. So if part of our cash flow forecasting project is to understand and map cash inflows and outflows in terms of people, process, and technology, and identify areas for improvement, that is going to improve decision making across the enterprise. That is going to impact the bottom line. I want you to recognize how to devise a strategy to address specific areas to improve the quality. Again, I told you how to frame that in terms of people, process, and technology. And then how to identify specific opportunities to improve the alignment of people, process, and technology in your cash flow forecasting process. A lot of this gets down to visibility. You need to have that visibility, people, process, and systems, and then identify the synergies that exist between those systems. The other point that I want to make, which is not really slide driven, is the business case. So I see a lot of people fall short in terms of constructing the business case and making an effective business case. So I always had a formal business case. And in terms of that formal business case, one of the key things was having a straightforward, solid executive summary. You want to disarm anyone that has objections to your project in the executive summary. If you know you're going to have a Mr. or Mrs. No who's going to want to torpedo your project, you need to involve them out of the gate. In terms of the lay of the land, you need to know what impacts your project is going to have on people across departments. Again, people, process, technology. You need to get those people on board. You need to get those people help you develop that business case for you. And then in terms of communicating that business case, we need consensus from two parties here, folks. Someone that's going to have to approve the investment of dollars, but also we're going to have to get the consensus approval of the people that are going to be impacted by the project. You can actually create a buzz at your company. All people feel like they're involved, they're engaged. How is it going to make their life better? How are they accountable? How are those metrics going to make them look like a rock star? Those things are all key. So those are our learning objectives revisited. Again, I think I've hit those home. If not, please let me know on your survey after the webinar is over. So I want a couple things. I want to talk about what's next. June webinars. We have a lot of CPE webinars, CTP, FP&A webinars coming up. FP&A transformation, accounts payable, business intelligence, stopping payments, fraud, and its tracks. So again, really related to cash flow forecasting, right? Again, the key cash flow forecasting is a key component of effective FP&A, right? AP, business intelligence, reporting, analytics, technology, payments, fraud. So again, all these topics fit together. We need to understand all of these things to optimize the strategic value of Treasury. Again, the hyperlinks are active. So what are some cash flow forecasting resources? This is an important point. Most webinars don't dare to touch on this. You need more than what I gave you today. So how do you connect with the resources and the people you need? Cash flow forecasting practitioners. How do you connect with these people? LinkedIn Treasury management groups. You folks need to be on LinkedIn. Yeah, there's a Treasury Management Network. Treasury Strategies has a lot of great groups out there. AFP LinkedIn groups. Go in there, look at the discussions, contribute, ask questions. I mentioned there's cash forecasting seminars. AFP and other organizations have very, very intensive cash forecasting seminars. The ones I would look for, ones that allow you to bring your data in. And so they actually work with you on building your model, validate your model. So that's where you want to go in with your data in hand and really do that hard work and start bearing down. And then there's also regional AFP conferences. So great content there as well. So for example, this is the season. We have the New England AFP conference coming up tomorrow. We have the Windy City conference coming up after that. And then we have the New York Cash Exchange Conference. These are great places to connect with people in terms of cash forecasting. There's on-demand resources. So I just wanted to call these out because I referenced these. So there's an on-demand education resource called Lumio, specifically the courses I mentioned: forecasting accuracy, using physical analytics to identify opportunities, calculating financial forecast accuracy. So there's a lot of resources out there. So you shouldn't feel like you can't afford to have access to the resources that you need. It's about the resources that you need, but also making those connections with cash flow forecasting practitioners. So if you're in retail, I want to talk to someone in retail who's had the same challenges, someone in retail that uses NetSuite, someone that uses Intech, someone that uses Oracle, has the same systems that you have. So those are the folks and the connections and the conversations that you have that are really going to drive the effectiveness of your cash flow forecasting the most. Again, intensive seminars. These are 5-day things. There's presentations and white papers. AFP has all the annual conference sessions now available at no cost online. So you can go back and look up cash forecasting. There's SlideShare, takes quality control, but there's over 1,500 free presentations on cash forecasting. You need to look at quality. Look to your bank partners. Ask them to connect you with clients who are in the same area, same industries you are. They're treasury management services providers. And if you really think that your company is way behind the curve, I would recommend that you consider bringing in a treasury consulting firm to really help you really understand what you need to do in terms of that really intensive. I would almost call it a transformation project. So that's where I might go to that deep level and go to those treasury consulting firms. So again, closing thoughts. So this is another slide I would print out. Cash forecasting best practices. Clearly define the goals of your forecast. You need to understand your data. You should identify and engage colleagues who face similar challenges. You need to figure out how to assess current resources and meet goals. You want to identify current inherent barriers to forecasting accuracy, perform a business gap analysis, and then build a business case for forecasting accuracy and sell it. So this brings everything here to a head. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question, and also talk about, I'll have time for a few questions. Again, if I don't get to your question, I'll go ahead and reach out to you afterwards. So I think people are a couple questions around data and access to data. So some of the sources, so some of those macro factors. One of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of the treasury management services providers are actually aggregating a lot of the benchmarking data and making those available to their customers and folks for a cost-effective fee as well. So one of the things that you're going to want to do is you're going to benchmark, right, that forecasting. So what is it that you're trying to do? So for my industry and my systems, what does a good cash flow forecast look like? I need to be able to get those benchmarks. So my advice there is to go to conferences, go to AFP, their website, and look at those past sessions. Join these treasury management groups, and then you'll be able to search in there and connect with those folks that have faced the same challenges that you face. The functionality of the searches that you can do in these systems is absolutely phenomenal. So you can pretty easily connect with those folks. I have time for one more question before we wrap things up. So the other question is around building consensus. So earlier I mentioned a few times about how people don't understand, don't care about the cash forecasting process. Well, sometimes it depends on the people involved. So some people, it takes a phone call. You have to explain to them why it's important. Some people need a specific incentive. Some people need the face-to-face interaction. And the other way to mitigate some of this is to centralize things as much as possible. So if we all have input into that short-term forecast, we all have to be using the same methods to collect data, aggregate data, or for estimating data. That needs to be consistent, but sometimes it takes that face-to-face. So for example, when we were going through a centralization of cash management, our treasurer actually went overseas to all of our operations and sat down next to the people that were moving cash, AP, AR. In general, if you show people that you care and really tie back the value that they offer to your company, they are going to be much more receptive to your to what you're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close down our webinar shortly. First of all, I want to once again thank our sponsor, Centage, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible. I encourage you to visit their website and see many other great cash forecasting resources. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for your valuable time. I apologize for the audio issues. I will be sending an email out tomorrow. Thank you very much. And have a great day, everyone.